Hello YouTube. I've decided to do something a bit different in this video, so I hope you'll forgive me for that. Rather than talking about social issues, fairness, or justice, I'm going to review the most recent Star Wars film, The Force Awakens. The reason I'm doing this is because I've always intended to do the occasional film review on this channel, and with Rogue One coming out soon, I think it's a good idea to look back at the triumphs and failures of the last one. For some context, I am a Star Wars fan, but not a diehard one. I've seen the original trilogy more times than I can remember, and I'm able to enjoy aspects of the prequel trilogy, but I generally think they are mediocre at best. Mostly due to poor writing, acting, and an over-reliance on special effects. So for The Force Awakens, I'm going to judge it based on 5 different criteria: plot, characters, dialogue, visuals, and entertainment. So let's start with the plot. This was a very comfortable, safe plot for a Star Wars film. It's the same story. The evil Empire, complete with Star Destroyers, Stormtroopers, evil British men, and a Sith Lord in a black helmet, versus the Rebel Alliance, our plucky band of heroes made up of ridiculously good pilots, poor resources, and of course our main characters. They even had the heroes set out to destroy a Death Star. For goodness sake, they even had our future Jedi main character start off on a desert planet indistinguishable from Tatooine. So in terms of originality, the plot is very disappointing. All that being said, there's a reason the original Star Wars movies are so beloved, because people like that kind of plot. Good overcoming all the odds to defeat evil. This plot also did a good job of setting us up for future films, and using Luke Skywalker as a MacGuffin, the thing that moves the plot along, was a very good idea by the filmmakers. So in general, the writers played it incredibly safe with the plot in this one, which means they also didn't screw it up in any really important way. So I give the plot a so-so. So characters. Let's begin with our main character, and my least favorite part of this film, Rey. Rey is a classic example of a Mary Sue. Mary Sue is a term from fan fiction, where a usually female character is inserted into the story as a sort of wish fulfillment for the author. They are usually extremely competent and earn the love, affection, and or respect of the already established characters. The important thing for me in identifying a Mary Sue, though, is that the character usually doesn't have any major flaws as a person. So an example of a Mary Sue character in, say, a Harry Potter fanfic would be a young female student who becomes Harry's girlfriend, Hermione's best friend, and who Ron has a crush on. This girl is a Quidditch star, an excellent witch, and the bad things that happen to her are due to the plot and are never caused by her own flaws. But regardless of if you subscribe to the idea of Mary Sues or not, I think it's fair to say that a character without serious flaws is a boring and poorly written character. Movies are often full of such characters, but when it's your lead character, it affects the whole movie. So, Rey is an expert mechanic, an expert pilot, an excellent fighter. Oh, and she also, without any training whatsoever, is more powerful with the Force than Kylo Ren, who has been trained in it. Rey can fire accurately with a blaster without any previous experience with guns. She can fly the Millennium Falcon better than, or at least as well as, Han Solo, without ever having flown it before. She can seemingly fix anything, and she never gets hurt or injured beyond getting knocked unconscious for short periods as a plot device. Oh, and she seems to have some direct connection to Luke Skywalker and the great Jedis of the past, depending on how you interpret her lightsaber vision. On top of this, all the other heroic characters love her almost immediately, and the villain treats her with the respect of an equal. She is a completely morally good person, and she has a tragic past. She's been living a role in her whole life with seemingly no friends or family, yet seems to have no personality or social issues whatsoever. So, I mean, it makes sense for her to be technically skilled if she has spent her life as a scavenger. But where did she learn to fly spacecraft expertly if she's never left her home planet? I mean, she knows how to fix hyperdrive issues when she's never used a hyperdrive in her life. And since she lives alone on this harsh planet, it makes sense that she knows how to fight. but at the same time, it would mean that she would have some serious personality or social issues by now. She would at least have a hard time trusting people, or she'd be incredibly shy or have poor vocal skills. Something to show that she hasn't lived a normal life up to this point. And one other small thing that bothers me, she lives on a desert planet. Why does she have unblemished pale skin? Anyway, as far as I'm concerned, Rey is an extremely poorly written character, and that fact makes the whole movie suffer. Our second leading character is Finn. At first glance, he may seem like a Gary Stu, which is the male equivalent of a Mary Sue, but I for one think he's got a major character flaw that saves him from being just another awful character. So Finn was raised from birth to be a stormtrooper and to believe in all the things the New Order stands for. When he entered his first battle, something snapped inside him and he realized the New Order was morally wrong. Where he got the sense of morality, I don't know, but he must have been exposed to it at some point. In any case, he embraces this new morality like a fanatic. He went from 100% loyal to the New Order to 100% focused on being a quote-unquote good person. That serves as his motivation for much of the film and makes up a big part of his character. He's a zealot about being what he perceives as good. What makes this a flaw is he has no moral objections all of a sudden to helping to kill as many of his former comrades in arms as possible. He's also shown a propensity for jumping headlong into situations because he thinks it's the right thing to do. If the writers use this trait effectively, we can end up in situations in future films where his need to be good gets him into trouble, and they can even explore his casual disregard for stormtrooper life if they wanted to really delve into him. My point is that, while Finn is quite capable too, he's not an expert at everything. He's not immediately loved by everyone, and he's not completely without flaws. The one really negative aspect of his character is his instant, irrational love for Rey, to the point where he's willing to risk his life repeatedly to protect and save her, and wants her to run away with him. This could be explained by him being attracted to her and experiencing the irrational effects of love, but she clearly shows no romantic feeling towards him, so I don't think that's a great explanation for his behavior. Our next character is the villain, Kylo Ren, and I loved him. For me, he was the best part of the film. This dude has got some serious flaws, and that makes him a great Sith in training. In him, we get to see the weakness and fear that's behind a lot of angry people. He's like the classic example of someone with anger issues who drives a Hummer because they've got a tiny penis. He feels weak, fearful, and inadequate, so he compensates by being angry all the time and wearing what he thinks is a cool outfit. They also didn't make the mistake of making him overpowered as a Sith. His lightsaber skills are mediocre, and his abilities with the Force, while strong enough to overcome non-Jedi characters, don't compare well to even an untrained Jedi. Having him kill Han Solo is also an excellent way to make the audience hate him, which is always important for a villain. It's going to be fascinating watching him develop as a character as these films progress. But, to be honest, based on how the writing has been done for the other characters, I'm not actually super hopeful that they'll develop him properly. Anyways, next up is Poe Dameron, who should be dead. The first time I watched this film, when the writer seemingly killed him off in the TIE Fighter crash, I was very impressed, and it gave me a lot of hope for the rest of the movie. I of course suspected that he would turn up alive later, but the way they did that scene with Finn finding his jacket sent a pretty clear message that he was killed in the crash. To set up a character as skilled, strong, and likable, and then kill him off would have been a very brave move for the filmmakers, and also would have helped serve as a strong motivation for the character Finn. Instead, they used Poe's fake death as motivation for Finn, then brought it back with a very flimsy explanation of how he survived, and no explanation whatsoever of how he got off the desert planet and rejoined the rebels in time to participate in the very next battle. And what do we really gain from Poe being alive? Just another heroic character who's incredibly skilled at what he does and seemingly has no significant flaws. The film would have been much better off killing him off at the beginning than either introducing a new pilot to lead the attack on the Death Star, or maybe, just maybe, don't have a squadron of X-Wings attacking the Death Star be part of the climax for once. Finally, we come to the already established characters. Leia played a pretty standard role of worried mother and overall matriarchal figure, Chewbacca was the same as he has always been. He hasn't developed at all as a character. Han Solo was the only one who demonstrated any amount of change, as he went from being someone who cares about nothing to someone who cares deeply about a lot of things and believes in the Force. Considering, though, that was basically the development of his character in the original trilogy, it seems he hasn't changed much since the end of Return of the Jedi. I'm kind of glad he's dead, because really what more could he add to the story at this point? That's pretty much it for the characters. The rest were so one-dimensional or cookie cutter that they're just not really worth mentioning. Now on to the dialogue. Let's just say it was disappointing. The standard action cliche of people having back-and-forth conversations in dangerous situations, where in reality they'd never have such conversations in those situations, that was there. But I'd like to point out 2 specific flaws in the writing. The first is a particularly bad example of dialogue. In the film, they arrive at the Mos Eisley Cantina, or wait, no, I mean the bar of that old woman whose name I actually had to just Google because Maz Katana is such a random, forgettable name. Anyway, so they arrive there, and Finn, whose motivation up to this point has been entirely to get away from the Empire, the First Order, decides he wants to escape rather than help fight. Okay, that makes sense. Now, Rey, despite the fact that she herself has every intention of not fighting, and instead wants to go home, so wants to go away as well, doesn't want to fight, she tries to convince him not to go. What happens then is some truly terrible dialogue. Finn pours out his heart, basically explaining his backstory and motivations, violins play in the background, and he concludes by saying, "Rey, come with me." She responds, "Don't go," to which he says, "Take care of yourself. Please." And that's it. So not only did the writers have a character just explain everything about himself, rather than having that revealed to Rey in more subtle ways, but the only response they could think to write for her is, "Don't go." That's the entirety of her response to finding out this guy she thought was a freedom fighter is actually an ex-stormtrooper. And it didn't help that the acting in the scene was subpar at best, but when you're given shit to work with, it takes a really great actor to make it good. And the second major problem I had with the writing was that every character seemed to be a Star Wars fan. Both Finn and Rey had heard of Han Solo for some reason. Finn knew of him as being a rebellion general, and for some unfathomable reason, Rey knew of him as a smuggler. Everyone in the film seems to have heard of Luke Skywalker and the Death Star. Basically, we're given the impression that the events of the original trilogy are now common knowledge in the universe. And fine, that makes some sense, but I think it's a bad choice and comes off to me as just nostalgia wank. And yet, at the same time that everyone seems to know about what happened before, there's been some rebranding for some reason. I get that the Empire can't be called the Empire anymore since it's not in charge, but why is the Rebellion now called the Resistance? It's got all the same leaders pretty much. The Rebellion famously defeated the Empire, so keeping the name would probably help with recruitment, right? The rebranding doesn't make any sense to me. And while we're on this tangent, why are the Rebel leaders still the Rebel leaders? Have they been fighting the Empire or the New Order in some form for all these years? Surely you'd think Princess Leia, for one, would have been a member of the Republic, and Han Solo would have been able to find more legitimate work, seeing as they're both now famous throughout the galaxy. But anyways, on to the visuals. This was the one point where this film was spot on. I can't think of any particularly bad visual effects. And maybe that's just because I'm not observant, but I came into this with pretty low expectations. I was extremely worried about this aspect of the film because I absolutely hate the action sequence in J.J. Abrams' Star Trek films. He uses blurry camera motion and super fast cuts in almost every fight scene so that you can't tell what's going on at all, and I was not looking forward to the same treatment being given to lightsaber battles. Instead, the lightsaber battle we got was actually really good. The camera was steady, and we saw essentially every move of the blades. And while it wasn't an epic lightsaber battle, I think that's a good thing, seeing as this is the first film. It means they can build throughout to have better and better lightsaber battles in each movie. Finally, the last and in many ways the most important aspect of the film is the entertainment value. In this aspect, the film was okay. As I mentioned, the visual effects and action sequences were very good. but the poorly written characters, specifically Rey and how everyone interacted with her, completely robbed the film of any real emotional impact. I found myself having a hard time caring about any of the characters. The biggest hit this film took, though, was in terms of its ability to sustain my suspension of disbelief. I'm willing to go along with almost any premise in a film as long as it's internally logically consistent and the filmmakers don't shove it in my face that this is a movie, it's not real. So the first time this movie started to lose me was when Rey was able to expertly pilot the Millennium Falcon for some reason. I forgave it at the time, though, because I figured maybe some explanation would be given. It wasn't. The second time the movie started to lose me was when Finn was grabbed by the giant monster on Han Solo's ship. These monsters were presented as unbelievably dangerous and were shown quickly killing a whole bunch of armed people. Then one grabs Finn, and for some reason doesn't kill him, but instead drags him around the ship long enough for Rey to be able to save him. No explanation is given for the monster's behavior. All they would have needed to do was show it clearly doing the same thing to other people. This was obviously a case of the writers sacrificing realism for yet another opportunity to show the audience how great Rey is. And to top it off, after being grabbed and dragged all around the ship for a full 36 seconds, I counted, Finn is completely uninjured and able to immediately get up and run. Now, you might say this kind of thing is common in action films, and I'll agree with you, but then Star Wars needs to stop presenting itself as anything other than just another mindless action flick, like The Expendables. But I must say, the good mindless action flicks will show their heroes to get injured throughout the story just to show how tough they are, and to add a sense of danger. The second I saw Finn go through that without injury, I knew he was never going to be in any real danger unless it was really useful to the plot. In fact, the only time he gets injured is when he needs to be unconscious so Rey can be the hero. After that, other things that helped kill my suspension of belief was Han Solo's fame, Poe turning out to be alive and somehow piloting an X-Wing in the very next battle, all the main characters witnessing Han Solo's death, the ground conveniently splitting between Rey and Ren, the list goes on. In the end, I was able to enjoy the film only on the level of a mindless action film, and by those standards, it was an okay movie. The battle sequences were pretty good, the visual effects were great, but to have the Star Wars universe, the mythology, the characters reduced to that level is very disappointing. I mean, this film is better than the prequels, but that's not saying much. I give it overall 6, maybe 6.5 out of 10. For reference, that puts it in the same category, in my opinion, as such movies as Jack Reacher, John Wick, Ant-Man, and Thor: The Dark World. So I think it's safe to say I'm not particularly excited for the release of Rogue One, especially after hearing the comments by that film's writers. So I hope you enjoyed this very different kind of video from me. Let me know if you'd like me to do more of these. I watch movies pretty regularly in my spare time, and I have no shortage of opinions on films I've seen. Until next time, I'm Positive Improvement, and I wish you all the best.